Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I have got a really interesting guest this week. His name is Samuel Itin, and he is the optimization and analytics manager for Cognetic, which was a company that was just acquired by Brilio. And he's also a board member for a nonprofit. And this is something we've talked about recently on the podcast, is how you can expand your network and your skill set through volunteer. So he is the board member for the American Marketing Association, the Triangle chapter, as the VP of Analytics and Marketing Technology. So Samuel, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, we were just talking before we hit the record button how crazy it is. I've been locked in my apartment. I stepped outside. I put 1 foot out. That's about it today.
That's more than I have. I have not left my house today. I did just make dinner real quick before the podcast, but other than that, I have not left the house. And actually, sadly, my podcast listening habits have also suffered because I would always listen when I would be on the way to work, and I haven't really commuted since March. And so I only listen to podcasts now when I go for a run outside or I go for a walk. But yesterday, I just listened to a really good podcast, but other than that, my podcast listening has also dramatically dropped, sadly.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, especially I think about those trying to start their career right now, which is wild, which actually kind of leads to the first question I wanted to ask you, which is, can you just walk us through your career path? So you were in the marketing analytics space?
That's right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say.
So optimization is marketing optimization.
So right now when it comes to optimization, most of our clients and what I do is, for those of you who aren't as comfortable or don't know as much about optimization, basically it's a little bit of an art and a science where you are trying to create the best experience possible, usually on digital experience, such as, let's say you have a website or you have an app, and maybe you have an analysis that you complete, and the analysis might point you into a certain direction. And sometimes after that analysis, you might go, that's interesting, but then it kind of stops there. What optimization really allows you to do is to take that to the next level, build a hypothesis, be able to figure out, what's the optimal user experience. It can be really simple, and such as changing the color of a button from blue to red is one of the classic examples. Or you can get really complicated and do things like personalization. So when it comes to the experiences that I help with our clients, it sometimes has to do with a product. So it could be an app, and it could be also a website. There are e-commerce sites that I help manage. There are classified sites that I help manage. And then there are apps that I also help manage as well. And like I mentioned, there's definitely an art and science to optimization. And sometimes it's more involved in the realm of how do we optimize the user journey from the marketing perspective. So it could be maybe having a stronger landing page or having a better user experience when people come from a certain place. Or it could be now that you have someone's attention, so you already have the marketing piece checked off. Now you want to be able to build an optimal actual experience when it comes to using the product. And so that might be more product analytics. But honestly, the line is, I think, very blurry between marketing analytics and product analytics. And it often tends to cross over in one field or the other, because you might talk to a marketer. A marketer might say, well, their opportunity is to try to get the best product in the hands of their customers. And they do that through strong marketing, but then they also, having a strong product can be a really strong marketing suit. So it really kind of works both ways.
That's one thing that I teach. I actually just put a lecture out on how you can put together a survey. And this is probably very, very rudimentary for you. But for example, I recently had a client engagement where they were selling medical devices, and they did a survey that was 15 questions talking about what is the hardware, what is the software, what is the, usability aspect of it.
Yep.
And then you take the 5 out of the 5-star stuff, and that is what informs your marketing copy. That's your differentiator. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that could be and then what you could do is then you can test that. So maybe for certain audiences, it could be, they might have a top 5, but then let's say for that medical organization, maybe it's doctors that they're trying to get their attention. So maybe they are responding to different language. So you can test that. And so, yeah, so there's lots of different ways to test and to learn. And my philosophy on optimization is, as long as you're learning something, you're moving forward. So if you do a test and maybe you don't get the results that you expect, that is okay in my perspective, as long as you learn from that and then you move forward. You don't always necessarily have to test, and because I think it humbles you and it helps check your ego, because everything, even things that you might have the hill to die on, or an executive might have a hill to die on, then you say, let's test it. And then you test it and you go, actually, it really wasn't as good as we thought it would be. It takes a lot of vulnerability and a lot of courage to say, I was wrong, but that's why you test. And I think analytics is taking the data to help you interpret, what is the path forward. And then I think optimization, in my experience, has been able to take what I've learned about analytics and then really apply it in a way that in my past lives, I haven't been able to do as much.
Yeah. I literally was having a debate / argument / discussion at a dinner party Saturday night at one of my business partners' houses. We were talking about, does it make sense to actually have a 5-year plan? Because if you plan 5 years out into the future, that is assumption upon assumption upon assumption, which maybe you should have like a 5-year range. And then it's like, you need to start, because that's what I'm starting to do with my own consulting agency. And I'm getting deeper into the education space.
Yeah.
And we're starting to, we're really playing with the idea of building out a platform that functions as career services for analysts.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And because what's kind of cool is I'm getting to put my feelers out, because I've got 5 courses on LinkedIn now, and I've had, I think, about 50,000 students take those courses. So I'm starting to reach out to the students who took that and say, hey, was this helpful for you? Oh, by the way, what was your career experience like? And I'm getting to kind of beta test all across the United States.
Yeah, right.
So now
is there like a common theme that's kind of emerging from like these analysts or people who are growing their analytics career, like different themes of like how they've mostly built their career?
Well, so yes, there is, but what I'm getting at when I'm reaching out and sending these direct messages, there's students that are currently going through either a master's program or an undergraduate degree in analytics. And what I think I'm getting a fairly strong signal that the generic career advice that, you have a 1-page resume, you put skills here, it's not mapping onto the real world. So that's where I'm thinking, oh, well, I could put together like an online platform, and I can bring in people, who are Excel experts, who are SQL experts, and then kind of help supplement that master's degree or that undergraduate degree. Because that badge, I think, gives you credibility that, you can go 4 years and you can get a degree and you're somewhat disciplined. But now there seems to be this pivot in the education space that you need to treat college kind of like a trade school now. It's almost like a hybrid liberal arts. You not only need to be like a worldly learned individual, but you also need to have a hard skill that you come out of the gate with.
Yeah. And I think that I would agree. And I think that the path to, becoming an analytics professional is, in my experience and from what I've seen, is definitely very windy. It's unusual to have point A and then point B and point C, and there's a straight line that goes through those. Usually it's a lot more windy because I think the field is incredibly dynamic. It's very young. And so you might find yourself in an opportunity that, even if, let's say, you started learning analytics 5 years ago, the way that the field has developed has completely changed. So like I would say 5 years ago, if you were able to master analytics tools, let's say if you're doing like marketing analytics, like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, then by mastering those tools, that was kind of the gold standard. And now those are much more table stakes. And I think, for example, if you're getting into the analytics space now, they might say, okay, it's great that you know those tools, but do you also know SQL, for example? Or do you know a little bit of R or maybe a little bit of Python? They're not expecting you. Well, I think some job postings might expect you to be a data scientist with 15 years R experience, even though that's pretty much impossible.
Right.
But I think that the bar keeps moving upward. And so finding opportunities for people to help close that gap and kind of be curious and to learn and have some career guidance as they go through a very windy path, I think is definitely very important.
Well, I think what's interesting is that you did not start your career like out of undergrad in the analytics space, did you?
I definitely did not. No.
That's a very common thing. But what I think is happening now is that people are now seeing that as like this is what I want to do. So I think it might be a little bit more structured, more linear. But I think that this is something that would be really valuable to the listeners is, what was your career journey?
Yeah. So I would say that I have a pretty non-traditional journey for a path into getting to analytics today. So my first role out of college was I actually ended up being a middle school teacher. And as a teacher, I was part of an organization called Teach for America. So for those of you that aren't familiar, you basically teach for 2 years in a high need, low income area somewhere across the country. And you do whatever it takes to try to close that achievement gap. And so you learn a lot. And actually being part of that organization, they were and are an incredibly data-driven organization. So when it came time to teaching my middle school students, so it was 7th and 8th grade remedial reading, and then also social studies eventually. Using data, we were able to keep track of everywhere our students were, what their progress looks like, what their success looks like, what they're still struggling with. And I kind of got to see up close how data can have an actual tangible impact on changing people's lives. So that kind of lit the light bulb for me. And I was always, even though I studied philosophy, politics, and law, and environmental science in undergrad, again, very not analytics focused roles. I always kind of considered myself more technically oriented, but still with kind of that liberal arts mindset. So after teaching, I ended up joining Pearson Education. So I was there for a couple of years doing like a leadership program. And I had the opportunity when it came time to do marketing analytics. We were responsible for helping build a lot of marketing campaigns. And this was really when social media was becoming a thing. And a lot of companies were trying to figure out, how do you measure success in social media? And what does success in digital marketing look like? So I just read a lot of books. I listened to some podcasts. I watched some webinars. I kind of got my hands on Tableau and just kind of started getting my hands dirty and saying to my manager, hey, look, here is how we can measure the success of our campaigns. And through that, because no one else is really kind of willing to do that, I was able to kind of niche myself as being the data analytics person. And then over time, that kind of just continued to grow. So after that, I worked at a startup company in the DC area.
Wait, before you go on, I
Yes.
want to drill down on that concept of finding your niche. I call it a niche. I don't know if that's a Southern boy
niche,
thing.
Yeah,
I
know.
Where are you from? Are you from up north?
I am from New York originally.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if that's like a Southern boy thing.
But I know I say things strangely because both of my parents were not from the U.S. And so I say things that like often my friends and family are like, I don't think that's how you say that. And I'm like, yeah, thanks for telling me like 20 something years later.
Oh, that's funny. But something that I wanted to drill down on, I want you to continue the story, but
sure, of course.
Let's pause here and talk about finding your niche. Because I think that there's this assumption that hard skills are more valuable than the soft skills is not the right word for it. It's business acumen.
Yeah, I like that. That's good marketing there.
Yeah, you learn the business acumen first.
Yeah.
And then that gave you context to learn these tools, which I think that is the biggest gap that anybody can go and take, like, tool knowledge is like very cheap now. You can go on Udemy for $10 and learn any tool that you ever wanted. But what you can't do is work in Pearson and learn about how they use data to sell more textbooks.
Yeah.
That's what you can talk about in your interview, I think.
I think that oftentimes does not get talked about enough, because I think you're right. When it comes time to learning a tool, I don't want to say it's commoditized in terms of it's not valuable, because believe me, you look at job postings and you look at the different roles out there, and being able to learn and have like a lot of tools in your tool belt in terms of doing R and Python and Spark and AWS and Tableau, and we can kind of have an alphabet soup of tools. That's true. It is incredibly valuable, but being able to have the knowledge and the context to really then apply what you're learning to a certain field. And so for me, I was a teacher, so I knew exactly how a teacher thought. I knew what they were looking for. I knew their needs. And when you think about marketing, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to figure out what does your potential customer need? How can you meet that needs? And I knew that because I lived it. I breathed it. I was in education for a while. And so when I took those skills to Pearson, and I was able to eventually learn those, I guess, hard skills later. But you're right, having that context and having the knowledge and kind of going deep on what your customers really want and what they need. I think oftentimes that's what I've seen, where a lot of people have kind of niched themselves into a certain industry, because a lot of people can do R courses or Udemy courses, but when it comes to actually having that knowledge, you have a unique set of skills and experiences that I think can really help differentiate you. And what I would like to call that can kind of be your, competitive advantage, something that you have that other people don't.
I was going to bring it back to marketing. That's your brand. That's your brand story, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It is. It is your story. And I think that analysts, and aspiring analysts should own that story, because where they came from and the path they came from, I think when they talk about the story, when they have interviews and when they have conversations with their peers, can be a really powerful differentiator, in addition to all of the skills that they may have learned doing online courses and getting certificates. And again, all that stuff is incredibly important, but you combine that with your story, I think it's a 1-2 punch that will help you secure a really good role in whatever you decide to do in the future.
Well, yeah, if you look at it from like a narrative structure, saying, oh yeah, I spent 2 years on Udemy and LinkedIn Learning, being a good boy or a good girl and like following instruction versus I went out into the business world and I saw this problem, and here are the data points that I looked at.
Yeah.
I figured, oh, this is off. And I brought that to my manager and I figured that problem out using data.
Right.
That does multiple things there. Like, number one, it shows you do have that technical acumen, that you can use data to drive a decision, but you're also proactive. You're not something me and Elizabeth talk about in the podcast, or maybe we haven't published this yet, but it's, are you an order taker, or are you kind of like a leader, or are you proactive, or are you reactive? And I think that just taking courses is a very reactive approach to learning something.
Yeah, so I think I need to take my own medicine too, because sometimes I might have a case of imposter syndrome, or feel like, well, I'll maybe be able to move on to the next level, like once I master this thing, right? And whatever that thing is, it could be R, SQL, Python, JavaScript, HTML, whatever the flavor of the day is. But it takes a lot of courage for you to say, I don't exactly know how to do this, but I'm going to learn. It's kind of like you're building the MVP for your life, right? The minimum viable product for your life.
I love that analogy.
So yeah, and because there's this concept, kind of called like wayfinding, right? And actually, this is kind of what optimization is, but wayfinding is kind of like where you have an idea and you pursue that idea, and then eventually you get to a decision point, and then you think, okay, should I pivot or should I double down, and should I continue working on it? And so knowing over time, as you get more experience, I think you get better at kind of identifying what are the best pivot points and what are the best points to kind of double down in terms of kind of growing your career. But taking an active approach and raising your hand, rather than just sitting back. And again, taking all those, like, I don't mean to disparage like all those online courses, because that's exactly what I do. Like, I've taken,
Hey, I sell online courses.
yeah, exactly.
Don't you
Right.
do that?
And they're incredibly important. Yeah. And I take, like, I have some Udemy courses that I've taken, and that's how I've kept up to date with a lot of different materials. So I'm not saying those things are not important. I'm just saying,
I'm just teasing you, man.
yeah, I know. It's about combining that, and kind of,
intentionality.
Leaning in. Right. Exactly. Like, you're learning with intention, not learning necessarily just because you feel like you need to learn. Because I know sometimes I fall into that trap where I feel like in order to advance my career, I need to master Python, for example.
It's kind of like hustle culture.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
you need to look like you're grinding all the time.
Right.
But
yeah.
I mean, it's true and not true. Like, I think when you start your career, you should grind and you should bust your ass, because there's different phases of luck. So the first kind of luck is hustle luck. So you don't have opportunities come to you until you go and you make a bunch of noise, or you turn over enough stones that you find something. But then once you kind of get into your career, you need to be a little bit more precise with where you spend your time and your energy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's having a very, I think, purposeful approach to how you want to grow your career, and then also raising your hand and really taking advantage of opportunities that might come your way. So, even like in my current role, when I think about optimization, that was something that I was kind of a bit more on the outskirts of. And I knew about optimization, and I always kind of advocated for it. And I was always an evangelist for, hey, now that we just did this analysis, let's test and let's figure out if what we are saying could really be applied. But then when it came time to take this role, in my current role, and leading a team of analysts around the world on a whole bunch of different clients, that was something that I felt like, did I take any formal optimization courses at that point? I did not. Like, did I study optimization on my undergrad? I certainly did not. And so but I knew that I had the skills and the capabilities to kind of learn it. And then now when it comes to the books that are currently sitting on my nightstand, all of them happen to say testing in it, or optimization, or experimentation. They have one of those three words pretty much somewhere in the title, because that is my current focus. And I know that even as I continue to grow in my own career, optimization was a field that I didn't even really know about. And it's something I've discovered this intense passion for. But whether or not I continue down this path of optimization, it is still kind of similar to all of the other analytic skills and to the marketing skills and the product skills that are all tangentially very interconnected with each other.
You've got a skill stack is what you got.
So yeah, I like that. That's
Scott Adams talks about that, about how, do you know Scott Adams?
No, I don't.
So he wrote Dilbert.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this, but
I do know Dilbert, but yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah. So he worked at like a bank. He got his MBA from Stanford, I think, worked for a bank for 15 years, really immersed himself in corporate culture and kind of saw the absurdity in a lot of it.
Yep.
So then he wrote that book.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it was like that mixture of, and then he got good at public speaking. So knowing the context, he was actually not even that good. This is another interesting kind of subset point of that, is that if you have a solid skill stack, so if you have 3 skills that are interrelated, you don't have to be the top 90%. You could be the top 80% of those 3 skills and then still be world-class as what your specific role is.
Because like your secret sauce is then like bringing it
right,
together. Yeah. I like that.
But I'm sorry, we totally got off on a tangent. So
that's okay.
You were at Pearson, and then I think you said you took your first official analytics job, right?
So that's where I was like a digital marketing analyst, or like online marketing analyst. And I think that was my first true like analytics role. And then after I was at Pearson for a couple of years, I had a couple of different roles because I was part of a rotating development program. I ended up working at a startup in the Washington, D.C. area. And with that, I was hired as one of the first employees of the company, the first sales and marketing hires. So I had the opportunity to build the sales and marketing team from the ground up. And a lot of the theory and a lot of the opportunity that I saw at a large company that I wanted to really move the needle on, which is sometimes hard to do with a company that was about 40,000 employees at that time, to go from 40,000 employees to I was employee number 7 or
Wow.
6. It's a big change. And so, but I knew it was total greenfield, and I wanted to make data to be the lifeblood of everything that all the teams do, and really kind of understand like what is the North Star for, like what is the main thing that each team is responsible for, and then how can data help that team get there. And then I saw the marketing team, because when you think about like the customer experience of the future, that and my belief is like a really good marketing experience, like through and through. Like that's the best marketing you can do, is to have a solid, experience from start to finish whenever your customers are going through your product or your service. And so I used data to really kind of help us inform like what our customers were doing, and used it not just for our marketing purposes, but also for our sales purposes and our product purposes. And it was an amazing opportunity to be part of a really fast growing company. And then personal circumstances, I wanted to kind of come back to North Carolina area. It gets complicated there. But I'm back to North Carolina. I joined another agency in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, being a director of analytics at a pharmaceutical agency. And then my most recent role, which kind of arrives me back to today, is I work at Cognetic, which is, as John David recently mentioned, recently acquired by Brilio. My role is I lead the optimization and testing practice. So basically, I lead a team of analysts that are around the world that help our clients do A/B testing and optimization for lots of different experiences and sites. So that's kind
I
of.
may need to hire you for when we launch this platform.
Because, I would love to be part of anything.
Yeah, because it's
I'm not like we're doing anything now anyway. I am baking a lot more than I used to, but that's pretty much it.
Oh man, I have the demand for online courses has just shot through the roof. The time of recording this, so it's August 3rd. I just wrapped up 2 new courses that I had signed with LinkedIn just since the lockdown. So it's been a bit nutty kind of in my world.
Yeah.
And then I just launched this Power BI course, which I felt weird doing that because of how we met. We met through
Tableau, right?
Was it the Tableau group?
Yeah, I think we met through the Tableau user group.
Right. So I was like, I ran the Tableau user group in Greensboro for 2 years. I was like really close with Christopher Scott. So I was like, is this cheating on him? Is he going to be mad that I'm like teaching courses on Power BI? But he was.
Did you get his blessing?
Yeah. Well, I had to like. No. Well, it was. I'm blowing it up a little bit, but I was a little bit nervous of like, oh, this course is going to get just like launched out there. We've had 30,000 people sign up in the first month alone.
That's fantastic.
And it's weird how much these things scale. But yeah, so we met at that Tableau user group it was in Durham, right?
I think it was, yeah, because I know I spoke at an event, but I think we met before that at another, maybe it was in Durham. It was somewhere, I think it was in Durham or in Raleigh where we met at the Tableau user group. So.
Right, because then I think I went to, did I go to one of your Digital Analytics Association meetings?
Yes, you did. Yes, that's right. Yeah, that was at, I think, Bell and Howell.
I thought that was where I met you.
Really? Oh, I thought I invited you to that. because I knew you from the Tableau user group, and I knew you were into data, and I said, hey, why don't you stop on by?
Maybe.
I could get it backward. It could be backwards.
Well, this was 3 years ago, which I think kind of brings to the point of like why we're talking about this is that networking doesn't have to be a super cringe fest. It doesn't have to be really uncomfortable, intense, because you're very active. Well, I guess pre-COVID.
Yeah, everything has to have an asterisk now. I know, right. It's terrible.
But just like being involved in the kind of, what would you call that? Like the analytics community?
Yeah, I would say analytics community.
Because I'm in Greensboro, which there's only 300,000 people in my city, but I mean Raleigh's like what, 1.2 million?
I think Raleigh itself is like 450-ish, but then you include the metro area and like Wake County, and it goes up to like 1.5 million or so. And then especially if you like think of the triangle. So for those listeners, I know I was disheartened when I first moved to North Carolina. Here it's called the triangle because there's 3 main city points, and they kind of form a triangle. So it's Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill. Hence the triangle.
They kind of have to form a triangle, right?
Yeah, they kind of do. It's kind of like a parallel. No, it is like a triangle. So,
but I think that this is kind of a rich pocket for us to kind of unpack a little bit, in that the last Tableau user group I went to I think it was in Durham actually, there were a bunch of analytics students there trying to get jobs. Like, and they actually had a whole segment called "Have a Job, Need a Job," where you'd like stand up and say, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do." How would you advise, or what have you seen in terms of people actually meeting people that are going to hire them or refer them to someone who might hire them?
Yeah. So I think from the perspective of someone who I think is trying to, grow their career or kind of pivot to become an analyst, I think some piece of advice that I think I can offer are getting involved. Kind of like what we talked about earlier, is having that intent and then having that active learning where you can really show your work. And part of the way that I really got started in the analytics field in general was I was part of a community called the Digital Analytics Association. And before that, there was also, I don't know if it actually still exists. I think it actually was reborn into something else, but it was called the Analytics Exchange. And it was an opportunity for students or people who wanted to learn about analytics to be paired up with like an analytics professional. And then you both volunteer on a nonprofit project. So I actually raised my hand and I got connected to someone who is now doing amazing things. I think like leading the data practice at Amazon, at Twitch actually, which is now owned by Amazon. And so she was an analyst, I was a growing analyst, and we actually ended up working on a data project for a nonprofit school in California. And I learned a lot just by working with her. And so I think by raising your hand and just saying, there are probably data needs everywhere. And if there is any local nonprofits or organizations that probably have data, which I think every organization does, even if you don't, claim or think that you're like a data expert, that is okay. I would say if you raise your hand and say, hey, maybe I'm not an expert, you don't even have to say that, but you can say, can I help? I'm pretty sure that most organizations will say, yes, we would love someone to help. And even if maybe you're not a data scientist with a PhD and 15 years experience, but I guarantee you'll be helping put them in a better position. That learning that you can do and kind of taking on that hands-on approach and getting involved in your community, raising your hand, trying to volunteer for projects, really helps put, I think, a lot of the learning that you're doing today in context, because while courses are great, being able to apply those courses and then show your work with an outcome, it's really powerful.
It comes back to that concept of what's your story? What problems have you actually solved? What have you proactively gone out and done? I can vouch for I've had multiple clients in the nonprofit space, and I've been the treasurer for a local nonprofit for the past 3 years. Those people are data phobic. They do not want
No.
to deal with data. So if you are not intimidated by Excel, you're already head and shoulders
Yes.
above 98% of the people in the entire room. I mean, I have a monthly board meeting where we're putting together financial reports, and it's just like crickets. I'm trying to figure that one out as to how can I make my treasurer's report a little bit more palatable.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling with that one.
I think, and I think that it's funny because when I think about my own like school journey, so this was really strange, but I think I was always relatively pretty good at math. And then in high school, something happened where it just got like turned off. That part of the brain got turned off. And then I think I was always throughout college, like really scared of math when I had no reason to. And the only math I felt like I can do was statistics, which has definitely come in handy. But now I've kind of, I think a lot of people, when they see numbers or when they see math, they get very scared. And so I think if you can be that data translator, even if
I was
you're
about to
part
say
of
data steward, data
or
translator.
data steward, or data Sherpa, data translator. There's all these different, but they all basically mean like, can you help people on their data journey, no matter where you go? Like I've often found that while the technical skills are important, having influence and being able to present in a compelling way, those skills are also really important, and you learn a lot about that. And if you volunteer or if you're part of a project, it's a pretty low risk environment, because even if you volunteer and you become the data person, and you open that spreadsheet and all you do is set up an average, okay, you've probably done things that are light years ahead of what that organization would normally do. And then maybe you turn out 2 months later, oops, I got that average wrong. It's probably okay. Like, it's probably not going to be the end of the world. And so I think by learning quickly, by applying, I think it can really take what you're learning. Normally it's just in a vacuum, and be able to, add that your secret sauce to it, that context to it. And I think volunteering is a really good way to do that. That is personally how I found a lot of success, is just by raising your hand and saying, can I help? Because servingly, I get my hands on more data sets. I get to learn more things. I get to experiment. But for me personally, I've always think about giving back, and you help organizations with any of their problems. So,
Right. I mean, we actually, we had a podcast, like we're doing this new thing called Tactical Thursdays, where we have like a 8 to 10 minute episode. And we talked about growing your career through volunteerism. And it's like, you can volunteer and give back in a self-serving way.
Yes, exactly. Right. You certainly, I agree. I completely agree with that. Cause I think like you get a lot out of it, and then the organization gets.
And I'd argue that doing it in a way that is self-serving to you in some shape or form is actually probably a more sustainable approach. Because if you're bending over backwards to do this thing for this work that you're not getting paid for, eventually you're just going to throw your hands up and say, I'm done. I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
But if you can kind of plug it into your long-term game plan, then it kind of gives it a renewed, at least that's been my experience. Cause I mean, full disclosure, I almost quit the treasury position earlier, like 2 weeks ago. Cause I had these 2 deadlines coming up, and it's like, I've got this committee meeting and I've got a board meeting. And it's like, I was like losing sleep. Cause I think COVID brain's real, because I could just not focus.
COVID brain and COVID brain. That is true.
And I was so stressed out. But I mean, I pushed through, and like, because I was thinking to myself, like, a huge area of weakness from my perspective as an analyst is that I'm not very good at financial analysis. But I'm kind of getting it's like a platinum mentorship, because I've brought the former CFO of Wrangler Jeans onto my finance committee. and he's
That's some pretty
advising
good
me
experience. Yeah.
on how we're going to attack our, financial budget and what are the KPIs. And I mean, he's kind of running things, but I feel like I need to be there just to learn. Cause I mean, the amount, if I mean, you're from the education space. I mean,
Yeah.
what would the price tag be on that of like, I'm getting to put together a budget, like the value of that in an interview of like, oh yeah, I worked with the CFO to put together a budget for this nonprofit and here are the results.
Yeah, I think it's priceless. That's something that, again, can be part of your story. And that experience is just as valuable as anything else.
Right.
And so I think that can help open doors for you in a way that might not be entirely clear today, but I think can really set you on the path to continuing success. Because again, I don't think it's a straight line, and some of those squiggles might involve volunteer opportunities or nonprofit opportunities, or just raising your hand and saying like, I don't necessarily know how to do this, but I can figure it out. And usually people are so appreciative of you wanting to help out that it'll be a win-win for both you and the organization.
But also you can get a sweet like tag for your brand, Mr. VP of Analytics over here.
Yes, that too.
Well, okay. Talk me through that. So what was your thought process of getting kind of into the volunteers? So I feel like we've been talking in very broad generalities. What
does it actually look like?
What was your process of like getting into it? What are your motivations for it? What do you think you've gotten out of it? I think you just posted the VP position, but correct me if I'm wrong, you have been volunteering for that organization for a while, right?
I have, yeah. And so I've been pretty involved with the American Marketing Association, and there are chapters all across the country. And actually, that's one of the first things I did when I moved down here to Raleigh. Is I didn't really know anyone at the time, but it is such an incredibly strong, dynamic community of about 500 marketers that are in all stages of their career, from all walks of life, and it gets lots of awards. And I was like, wow, like I want to be part of this energy. So the way I got involved was I became a mentor for a budding marketer, and I just got really involved in the organization, and I loved the working with the people. And then last summer, I sent an email to the incoming president of the chapter. And basically it was an email about, hey, I noticed that you have a lot of data. No one really looks at the data. And also when it comes to marketing, if you really want to be at the forefront of being a chapter, you need to probably think more about like the more technical aspects of marketing as being just as important, and getting marketers opportunities to learn about this stuff. And they said, congratulations, you are now the director of analytics and marketing technology. And then I just kind of committed myself through the following year, just building a team. I was able to identify like 4 of the analytics and marketing technology pillars we need. And so I've been able to build a team around that. And yeah, I was able, and I've definitely made my fair share of missteps, but we just keep moving forward as a chapter. And then eventually they made my director role a official board position. And so now I became a VP of analytics and marketing technology for the chapter. And I know it's the first time, like it's the first, they've never had a role like this before. Inaugural role. And I think most chapters across the country don't really have like an analytics role like this or a marketing technology role like this. And those are 2 of my passions. So
you're a board member and an innovator. Got it.
Yes,
you're breaking new ground here.
I'm trying to break new ground, but it all started with, hey, could I help? Or I noticed something, and really, and honestly, it met a receptive audience, and people were like, yeah, that sounds great. And I first kind of just got involved by working with different committees and doing reports for them. And like, even if they were relatively simple, dashboards that I built in Tableau or like a simple visualization in Google Data Studio, that was like light years ahead of what they've had, which was nothing. And so to go from nothing to, hey, here's some data, it might not be perfect, but it's a lot more than you had before, for like a nonprofit organization, that is really powerful. So I ended up just weaseling my way through getting this role, and
it sounds
building a
like
team.
you walked slowly with your chest puffed out. Like
I think that's
you just
what it
took up
takes.
all the space. See, we're very different because you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I have
Yeah.
like the opposite, to where I have delusions of grandeur, to where I will just think I'm awesome, and part of my, like, I don't know, character journey is realizing that you need to be humble and you need to listen more. But it sounds like I'm kind of in the gross minority, because most of the people I talk to are like intimidated about like moving forward in their career. And because to give you context, like when Silvertone Analytics, like we dissolved our partnership, and it's funny because my former business partner is now the president of one of my largest clients. But he was selling projects that I had never done before, and I had to figure out on the spot
how to do it.
how to do it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in those moments I was very like, I don't know, tense, and like the imposter syndrome definitely did set in those moments. But generally speaking, I'm overly confident. But it sounds like what you've done though is you've had a series of successes, and that's how you build real confidence.
So I feel like we can have a whole another hour-long podcast on imposter syndrome. But I think that I do generally feel like pretty confident in what I do, but I think there are, for me, like moments of extreme vulnerability is probably the way that I'd put it. And I usually end up rising to the challenge, but I think sometimes the initial fear is, oh, I don't have this credential, or I don't have this exact skill set, or I don't have this tool that I know how to do. So I'm doomed to never be able to do it. And then usually I brush myself off and I'm like, no, I can do this. I can figure it out. And so like, it's a weird mixture of like being able to take advantage of opportunities and like really embrace, because like one of my favorite, I do love to learn, and I love when I am able to check my previous assumptions and try to unpack my bias and really kind of think about things critically. But sometimes that journey does take me a little while to get there, and I think that's my own burden to bear, where I have to just be very I think as I get more as I grow in my career more and more, I think I am more aware of like what I need to thrive, and I think I'm also more aware of how I think there can be a healthy amount of, I think, delusions of grandeur, as you'd put it, or a healthy amount of imposter syndrome, because it's that balance. So maybe it's because I probably watched Hamilton like 25 times already. But it's kind of like, there's the song in Hamilton that is like all about never being satisfied. And on the one hand, that was Hamilton, where he was never really able to be truly satisfied. And so he always pushed forward, and he was able to create so many amazing things. But of course, it kind of led to his downfall to a certain degree. And, he kind of drove himself a little crazy because he always felt like he had to keep pushing. And so it's about finding that balance between how can you push and grow and learn, but still be comfortable where you are today. And for me, that's a learning process that I think I'm always learning more about myself, and some days it's more intense than others. Yeah. But it's just
I'm struggling with that right now, because I have some success, and then I immediately blow it in my head of like, all right, how can this get to $1 million? Or how could this be like,
the goalpost keeps moving, right? And then you never feel like satisfied.
Right. Cause
Yeah.
well, I was talking with, do you know Ken G? He's a data science YouTuber.
No, I don't.
So he just moved from Chicago out to Hawaii, and me and him had a Zoom call a few days ago, and we were talking about all our plans. And yeah, I've got like 6 different things on my plate right now, and it's funny because like the more successful I'm becoming, the more unsuccessful I feel like I am.
You feel yes,
right? Because like if I wanted to right now, I could just cut off all my commitments and just travel to like Costa Rica or my Thailand and retire for like the next 3 to 5 years, because that's my passive revenue stream is like at that point with the courses. So I didn't take a single moment to like
appreciate where you are and appreciate your journey, because then like the goalpost keeps moving, and I think it's that's something that I know, like personally, I think I struggle with, because I think that's where like a certain level of growth can come in. And it takes a lot of courage to also, I think, be okay with where you are today, but then want to continue to grow. Like, growing and learning and developing and progressing, like I see nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it can go so far that it either paralyzes you, because then you're always worried about, I guess, perfection or doing the right thing rather than truly growing and learning. But that's a big challenge. And I get it. I'm right there with you, because I always feel like the moment of success that you have, like you accomplish a great thing, but then it feels like, okay, the goalpost has moved again. And what is that? What am I actually ever going to be like truly happy or satisfied? So I think that's a big philosophical question.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. You with your liberal
philosophy
arts degree. Let's think about this.
I guess it did come in handy for something. So,
for quite some time. But you're coming from the education space. So I don't think I've told you this yet, but I'm on the advisory council for Greensboro College now.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great.
And I've been advising them on rolling out an analytics minor that I'm going to be teaching.
That I think is very much needed, because I think a lot of times programs, like, it's good to kind of close that gap between like, programs and like reality, and you have both feet in both places. So,
I wasn't done with the thought of the thread. So I'm teaching data visualization. Actually, it's going to start in 2 weeks. And we're actually going to be using some of my data from my courses. And I think what I'm going to actually do is put together an ad campaign, and then have only have 8 students in my cohort. So it's super small. I think I'm going to break them out into 2 teams and then have them compete and see who can get me the most subscribers, because I want to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But what's coming up in the spring, which I'm like, I don't think I've talked about this publicly yet on the podcast, is that I'm now reaching out to past clients of mine, or even current clients, and saying, hey, I've got 8 students. Do you have any projects that you haven't gotten around to yet? So like now I'm going to get to sit there and advise them in a consulting setting.
Yeah.
And it's such a sophisticated solution, because it works for me. Like I'm getting to see where the students are having pitfalls, and I can like coach them through, hey, you weren't clear with how you communicate with the client, or, this metric isn't your KPI. You should probably focus on this. And then my clients get free work, and the students get like
hands-on experience.
But because I will say this, the number one most valuable thing I got out of my MBA was a capstone course where we got to consult with Hanes Brand, and like we did some marketing analysis. And I mean, to be frank, like it was okay. Like it was cool that I got to work with data, but it wasn't like there wasn't a huge upside for them.
Yeah. You mean for Hanes? Or for the students?
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm being like overly nihilistic or cynical, but like, I don't know. I was on Reddit, and someone was like about the people who go and like build houses in like Guatemala. What are those people called?
Like Habitat for Humanity sort of
Yeah,
thing?
like
Or
someone
yeah. Uh-huh.
someone on a Reddit thread was like, "Oh, great! Now this guy's got to babysit 12 kids for 2 weeks."
Okay.
Like, I mean, maybe that's like an overly cynical
Yeah,
analogy,
yeah.
but um, it it didn't seem like there wasn't my professor that like helped put together the capstone class didn't have an established working relationship with that client. So it wasn't like, I think we did create value, but it wasn't like,
So maybe it was more like surface level.
right.
Like it wasn't like deep knowledge or like something deep that you were helping them create. It was more like, okay, you helped create something, but more like anyone can do that. Not like you were really embedded into. It's almost like when you do analytics, right? When you have a deep relationship with a stakeholder or like Inception, like are you surface level or are you going a level deeper? And when you go those levels deeper is when you can really have an impact. So I think is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Kind of like, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I guess what I wanted to ask you was, I don't know anyone else who's like taking this approach to education, like in the entire world right now.
You mean in terms of like the
Like they have a
hands-on learning that you're
consulting
doing?
agency,
Yeah.
and then they're bringing, maybe I'm just in Greensboro and it's small and there's not a lot of that.
I mean, it sounds like, well, when you got your MBA, was there kind of like, well, I guess there was like the capstone, but were there other like business case studies that you did? Or like, did you do like the case study method that I know like Harvard does?
Yeah. So, I think case study, like learning through case studies is a terrible approach to education, but that's like a whole debate to be had.
Yeah.
That's like, playing a video game where people are playing basketball and being like, all right, I'm ready to go join the NBA now. It's like, you got to be there. Cause I think there's no weight to the, decisions. There's no consequence.
Yeah. And so it sounds like, what you're doing is you're being able to create that consequence and be able to create that weight, which I think is going to be really meaningful for the students.
Right. What I'm hoping to do, and I don't know if this is me being like big brain and ambitious, like I'm going to be the like best in the world at this. But I'm hoping to have the client say this project was worth $100,000 or $50,000 or 30 or how much ever dollar amount, so that then we can take the students and say, you can quantify this. Cause I think that's something that's missing on a lot of resumes, like quantifying the impact.
Yeah.
I mean, did you do that in your, in your resumes?
Yeah. So I do. And there's a formula that I have used that has served me very well. And it's from the person who was like the chief people officer at Google. His name is Laszlo Bach, and his way of building a resume is like a way that I like to build it, which is basically you were able to accomplish X by doing Y, which had the impact of Z. And when you put that together in a sentence in your resume, it's like I was able to grow our marketing leads by by focusing on top of funnel metrics and decreasing and increasing our return on ad spend by 20% and increasing our leads by 30%, something like that. What you're able to do is you can really quantify your experience. And so throughout my resume, most of what I use when I talk about the roles that I've done have some sort of quantifiable method attached to them. Because I often found, I think, especially in marketing, where obviously marketers are really good marketers and they market themselves.
Right. Yeah.
But being able to quantify that and to say you were able to accomplish X, I think when you look at what's been happening to CMOs out there today, where like they typically have their shortest tenure out of any C-suite, and it's often because I think other executives are being asked to like show me the results and show me the money, and marketers are being asked that now a lot more these days than the past, because they're being forced to justify their expenses and being forced to justify the impact that they have in an organization. And if you as a marketer say, we made a great story, okay, but can you quantify that? And if you can't, and then I think this is an argument for most marketers, I would agree to, and this is kind of where like my marketing and analytics kind of intersects, but I think it's important for marketers to gain some sort of technical understanding or, some number understanding. If you're able to quantify that, then you're really, I think, able to be a lot more successful, not just in your personal life and, growing your own career and putting yourself forward, but also with the impact that you have at whatever organization you're part of.
Interesting.
So
yeah.
That's how that's worked well for me. And I've tried to, like when I was a mentor for the Triangle chapter, that's something that I tried to get my proteges to think about on their resume is using, even if you don't follow that structure exactly, I found it's a pretty good exercise to like very succinctly summarize in like a sentence or two something you did and how you did it and what was the outcome.
I love that.
So,
See, I'm lucky because I can just ask my clients, hey, how much was this worth to you?
Yeah.
And they'll tell me in dollars and cents.
There you go.
Especially like if I'm working with the CFO, they can like pretty much do the math
right.
and off the top of their head and say, yep, this.
But if you, and then I think if you going back, like if you're an analyst and you're focusing on marketing analytics and you ask a marketer, what was this worth to you? They might shrug and go,
it's a good awareness campaign.
How can you, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It's an awareness
Everyone
campaign.
knows about us now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You can't really, and believe me, I've done my fair share of those, but it's, being able to quantify that and measure that, if that is the value you can bring and tie that around a story, as a marketing analyst that's growing, I think that could be very powerful.
Interesting, man. There's so much to just kind of like digest within this conversation, and I'm glad.
We can talk about Brene Brown, vulnerability, Hamilton, COVID.
Yeah, education.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that we didn't. Usually, for those of you guys listening, like I kind of like debrief for like I don't know however long. We just hit record and just started talking. I mean, we touched base a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, a tiny.
But like a minute or two, and then just hit record. But yeah, this was amazing, Samuel. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, this was fantastic. Thanks for having me. I wish you the best of luck in your courses and and that program that you're going to be doing together with with Greensboro College. And I think you're doing a great service by just helping people get some true hands-on learning. So I'm glad it's through the podcast, and I'm glad it's through all of the other opportunities you're creating. So glad to be a part of it.
Thanks.